A minor traffic stop led to a tragic death and national outrage. But would anyone be held accountable? This is the Sandra Bland story. Hey, Meghan.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. We look a little different today.
Ugh, I'm so tired. I'm not going to lie. This is like the worst morning. I feel like I just need a nap, but you
I
look
have a good
great.
case for you. Oh, thank you.
I remember when years ago it was you that was always tired when your kids were young. You were always tired.
Now I'm so awake.
Well, maybe not, but you were like I was like living my best sleep life and whatever, and now I'm just I'm tired.
Swapped. But it's better that we weren't doing it at the same time, because we would have never been able to get anything done.
Never. No, it's good, and it's all good. It's all good.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. So Sandra Bland, you obviously know this name. Everyone, I think, listening knows this name. And this case has been on my list for years. Yeah. But I moved it to the top after we recorded our recent Reconsidered episode on race and crime in America.
Yep.
Actually, just based on our recording schedule, that episode doesn't actually come out until next month. So I'll be talking about that episode a little bit, but you'll all have to just wait a few more weeks to hear our Reconsidered on that. So we've not yet told Sandra's full story, but she is one of the cases that we discussed on that episode. Mm-hmm. And it just reminded me of the importance of her story and got moved right up to the top of the list afterwards.
Yeah, I saw.
All right, so let's go ahead and meet Sandra. Sandra was born on February 7th, 1987, and she grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Naperville. She graduated high school in 2005 before attending Prairie View A&M University in Texas. And Sandra was a very involved student. She worked as a counselor for a nearby summer camp. She pledged a sorority called Sigma Gamma Rho. She played in the marching band, and she also volunteered for a senior citizens advocacy group. She graduated in 2009 with a degree in agriculture, and then she went back to her hometown where she worked in administration for a food service equipment supplier. Despite these accomplishments, Sandra had some history of run-ins with the police throughout her late adolescence and young adulthood. Starting in June of 2004, she had at least 10 traffic-related encounters with police in Illinois and Texas, as well as being charged 5 times for driving without insurance, 4 times for speeding, and 1 each for driving while intoxicated and for drug possession.
Wow, so she's like a driving-related offender.
A driving-related offender, yes. And we'll talk about why that might be at the end. In May of 2010, she was charged with marijuana possession in Houston. And in this particular case, she pled guilty and was sentenced to 30 days in Harris County Jail. In another legal case in 2014, her license was suspended for 6 months after pleading guilty to a DUI. So likely due to these experiences, Sandra became very outspoken in January of 2015. And she began posting on social media about race and the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. Her posts would often include stories about police mistreatment of African Americans, and in one particular post she wrote, quote, "In the news that we've seen as of late, you could stand there, surrender to the cops, and still be killed."
That's powerful.
At this time, many described Sandra, and she likely self-identified as well, as a civil rights activist in Chicago, and a big part of the Black Lives Matter movement. In the summer of 2015, Sandra quit her job at the food supplier and moved to Prairie View, Texas to take a temporary position as a summer associate. And it was here that she was pulled over by police on July 10th, 2015. The officer, 30-year-old Brian Encina, pulled Sandra over for failure to use her signal to change lanes. Important to note here that this type of stop was not abnormal for Brian, or really for most cops for that matter. Oh. But Brian in particular had a history of performing pretextual traffic stops. Now, I know that you know what these are, but I'm going to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about this.
Actually, I'm not sure. Pretextual? I don't know if I've heard that lingo before. Okay.
You definitely understand the practice. And the reason why I'm so familiar with it is I teach a course on race and crime, and this is a really big part of when we talk about the idea of driving while black. You've heard of that?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretextual traffic stops occur when law enforcement use a minor traffic violation as a pretext to investigate a driver for a more serious offense.
Okay.
And this is technically legal under the Supreme Court's Wren versus the United States in 1996. However, these stops have raised concerns about potential racial bias and the impact on public trust in law enforcement. So very briefly, in Wren, the U.S. Supreme Court said that a traffic stop is lawful if a police officer has probable cause to believe a traffic violation occurred. Now, this is regardless of the officer's subjective motivation. So this essentially means that the police can stop a vehicle even if they are primarily interested in investigating a different crime, as long as there is a legitimate traffic violation to justify the stop.
Right.
So this clearly can and does cause many issues.
Yep.
Now,
It's so interesting. I've never heard of it called pretextual.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, I talk about it a lot in my race and crime class. You know the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander?
Oh, yeah.
She talks a lot about these types of stops and how it contributes to the over-incarceration of people in minority communities. And as I mentioned, a little more commonly or more in the public consciousness, this has been referred to as driving while black, but it's essentially the same idea.
Good to know. Like, I feel like it's amazing how much I can still learn with you, Amy.
Oh, thanks, Meghan. Likewise. So now back to Brian in particular. In less than 12 months, he had issued over 1,600 mostly minor tickets using the pretext of little enforced minor infractions to perform random searches of cars in hope of finding something criminal.
That's excessive.
And unfortunately, what I don't know is how many of these were people of color. Now, I could not find that information. But if there were evidence of him racially profiling, that would be obviously cause for serious concern. And as I mentioned, these types of stops are usually disproportionately performed on people of color.
But it's probably in his case, if you couldn't find like some disproportionate, just that it's almost like the conviction is the win. You know what I mean? Like just like finding something. He's just looking for something, maybe perhaps to bolster his record, show that he's doing his job, kind of maybe that.
Yeah.
So.
And again, it doesn't mean that he wasn't pulling over people primarily of color. I just couldn't find the information that broke it down. Okay, so his particular stop of Sandra was recorded by his dash cam, and there was also bystander video. Now, in these videos, they're all available online, and we will have links to all of them in our show notes. But you can see the officer's tone and attitude shift after he asked Sandra if she was irritated. And she responded that she was, because she was. Basically, she was wondering why was she being pulled over. Now, Officer Insignia initially wrote her a minor traffic offense. When he returned to her car to give her the ticket, he continued talking to her and told her to put out her cigarette. She responded, quote, "Why do I have to put out a cigarette when I'm in my own car?" She was then ordered to get out of the car. At this point, things escalate. She refused, and she was told that she's under arrest and that she needed to get out of the car, citing, quote, "I'm giving you a lawful order." She still refused to get out of the car, stating that she's not under arrest, as she is not aware of the reason, and therefore she is not obliged to get out. At this point, the officer opened her car door, shouted over a dozen times for her to exit the vehicle, citing, quote, "Step out or I will remove you." The interaction became quickly heated during this exchange, but Sandra complied after Brian threatened her with a drawn taser and told her, quote, "I will light you up."
Oh my gosh.
While still holding the taser, he then pulled her out of the car and put her on the ground. This part of the interaction can be seen by a bystander's video of the arrest, which shows Sandra on the ground with two officers standing over her. At this point, backup was called.
Oh, okay.
She could be heard saying, quote, "You just slammed my head into the ground. Do you even care about that?" At this point, she also informed officers that she was epileptic.
Oh, okay.
After putting her in the police car, she was driven to Waller County Jail and placed on a $5,000 bail. Again, all of these videos are available, so you can draw your own conclusions about the interaction.
Sure.
The next morning, on July 13th, 2015, at 6:30 a.m., Sandra refused breakfast. Then, shortly after, at around 7 a.m., she told an officer who was making a routine check, quote, "I'm fine." About an hour later, she requested to make a phone call from her cell. However, no call was ever made, and it's not clear who she wanted to call. Around 9 a.m., a corrections officer was doing their rounds and they found a shocking scene. Sandra was found hanging in her cell, allegedly after she fashioned a noose with a plastic garbage bag liner. Paramedics declared Sandra Bland deceased at 9:16 a.m., and her cause of death was listed as suicide. Friends and family immediately questioned not only her treatment, but also the official report of her manner of death.
Mm-hmm.
There were some people who pointed out that she had posted a video to Facebook weeks before the arrest, revealing that she was combating, quote, a little bit of depression as well as PTSD. But her family reported that she was really excited to start her new job, and she had been in really good spirits.
Do we know what the PTSD was related to?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
I do know that she was very open about her struggles with mental health, but I don't think she got into exactly what she was trying to overcome at that point.
Okay.
However, while her family found her death incredibly suspicious, we don't know what someone is dealing with internally, and oftentimes people who may seem happy and full of life can die by suicide, and loved ones are shocked. Now, this had me thinking of Stephen Twitch. Remember?
Yep.
In that case, I think that really opened up to the world, really, because it was it was so publicized.
Yeah.
His online or his media persona was so happy and bright, and nobody could understand how somebody could kind of be living that like dual existence.
Right.
That's what it made me think of.
That makes sense. Yeah.
There were reports from an inmate in the cell adjacent to Sandra who said that she acted very distraught while she was in her cell. She was very emotional. She was crying frequently, and she was specifically upset that her friend was not coming to bail her out. So I guess if we play devil's advocate, if she was already feeling depressed or if she was struggling in some way, perhaps the arrest and the lack of support may have been enough to push Sandra to self-harm.
I just can't remember. I know that she was found at 9 a.m., you said on the 13th, but when was she arrested again? Like, how long was she there? I'm trying to get a timeline here.
She was arrested on the 10th, and I don't have much information about what was going on those few days.
But she was there for 3 days.
She was there, but yeah, the timeline really starts that morning at 6:30 a.m. when she refused breakfast, and then at 7, an officer saw her, and then again at 8, another officer saw her, and then around 9 is when that final officer made the discovery.
But I think what's important for that's all very important, sorry. But I think what's important for people to realize is that she was in a jail cell for 3 days when they're wondering how quickly does someone decompensate? Especially in solitary studies, it can be 48 hours. So it's just something to keep in mind.
But again, just to play devil's advocate once more, we don't know if she was in a cell with anyone else, if she was isolated, was she in any type of solitary, was she in more of a pen? I don't have that information. And when she was found deceased, she was certainly by herself, but I don't know about the other hours in that jail.
Even not solitary though, but just being in jail for 3 days. That's really traumatic, whether it's justified or not.
So a lot of people have their hypotheses. Some people think it's suspicious. There was even some online sleuths that said it looked like Sandra was deceased in her mugshot. Again, people like to have these conspiracy theories. So, people are saying, well, maybe she was murdered and,
Oh, okay.
I don't see facts to back that up, but what I think is important is let's look to the autopsy to see what it reveals. So Sandra had no defensive injuries on her hands that would indicate a struggle of any kind. There were injuries on her wrists that coincided with a struggle while handcuffed, however.
Okay.
The medical examiner said that marks on Sandra's neck were consistent with suicide, and the autopsy results also highlighted weeks-old marks that were found on her arms that suggested self-harm.
Oh.
But these findings didn't lessen public suspicion, as her family were not the only ones who felt that her reported suicide was unfounded. In fact, not long after her death, several hashtags began trending on Twitter, including hashtag Sandra Bland, hashtag Justice for Sandy, and hashtag What Happened to Sandy Bland. And I don't know if you recall, but her death was compared to other highly publicized deaths such as Freddie Gray, Walter Scott, Eric Garner, Michael Brown.
Yep.
And at the root of public skepticism was the ongoing debate over police brutality and race relations in America.
Right.
Just to put this in context, Sandra's death happened just a year after Eric Garner was killed by the NYPD. So Sandra's case seemed to fit perfectly into this pattern of police violence and systemic racism that had become increasingly visible to the American public at this time. In fact, according to the Washington Post, that very year of 2015, 531 people had been shot and killed by police just in that 1 year.
Oh, what? Oh, okay.
In 2015.
That's a higher number than I realized.
Mm-hmm. The day after the autopsy was released, more than 100 protesters marched from Waller County Jail to the courthouse to demand an investigation into Sandra's death.
Mm-hmm.
You remember this. I see you shaking your head, right?
Yeah, I do remember
this. Was very publicized.
Yep.
Over the next week or so, officials released footage from both the stop, the arrest, and from the jail. Again, all of these can be viewed on YouTube. And there are several angles. Now, the videos online run over an hour. There's also some videos that were released by police. But as I mentioned, her arrest was also filmed by a bystander. So you can kind of see some police release videos, dash cam videos, and videos done by a bystander. And there's also a video that Sandra took with her own cell phone, which shows a different perspective. In late July 2015, prosecutors named a committee to review the case. And a few months later, on December 21st of 2015, a grand jury heard the case, but chose not to indict anyone in connection with Sandra Bland's death. Meanwhile, Sandra's family filed a federal lawsuit and a wrongful death suit against Trooper Brian Encinia, Waller County, and the Texas Department of Public Safety. I believe they settled for almost $2 million.
How much?
$2 million.
Oh, okay.
I would have expected more, actually, given the high profile.
I guess, but it's a settlement, so both sides, are gonna.
Mm-hmm. On January 7th of 2016, Trooper Encinia was indicted on a perjury charge to which he pled not guilty. And he was later fired by DPS, the Department of Public Safety.
Is the perjury charge related to Sandra's death?
It is. I'm going to get to that in a moment.
Oh.
An internal investigation was also launched, and in a 2-page inspection report, the Texas Commission on Jail Standards found that Waller County Jail was found to have been ignoring protocols regarding prisoner observation. So this is where we see some systemic failures in this case.
Okay.
Jail officials were not aware that Sandra had been prescribed a medication for epilepsy, and she had not taken that medication in several days. One of the side effects of going cold turkey off of these medications is suicidal ideation and psychosis.
Oh, this is huge.
In addition, she also reportedly told jail staff that she had previously attempted suicide and that she was feeling depressed, and that this was occurring during her intake.
This is so interesting because just yesterday I took my class on a jail tour in Morristown, and I met with medical, and they were talking about like the rigorous intake that they do and how they treat people who, they go through medications. And I mean, it was so thorough with the facility was so thorough. I was like really impressed. I mean, it's what the standard should be, but so just hearing this today is like a little disappointing.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's because of Sandra's case and others that there have been so many positive changes. So
Sure.
I'm wondering if this jail was always doing things like that.
Oh, good call.
In response to Sandra's death, Texas passed the Sandra Bland Act of 2017. Now, this act provides education to police officers about mental illness and de-escalation, and it mandates that jails divert people with mental health or substance abuse issues into treatment.
Okay.
But this new act and Sandra's death did not spell the end for many other troubling reports of people of color who were pulled over in traffic stops and died as a result. Now, there have been several of these. I want to talk about some of the more publicized ones briefly. There was Jareem Reed, who was pulled over for running a stop sign in New Jersey in 2014. Then there was Walter Scott, who was pulled over because his brake light was out, and that was in South Carolina in 2015. Then there was Samuel Dubois, who was pulled over for missing a license plate in Ohio in 2015. And then Philando Castile, which I'm sure you've heard of, he was pulled over because police said that he had, quote, a wide-set nose that resembled a suspect. That was in Minnesota in 2015. Then you have Duante Wright, who was pulled over for expired registration and for an air freshener hanging from his mirror, Minnesota, 2012. Then there was Patrick Lawyer, who was pulled over for an improper license plate in Michigan in 2012. And lastly, Tyree D. Nichols, who was pulled over for reckless driving in Tennessee in 2003. Now, I want to remind you that all of these individuals lost their life after these, quote, minor traffic stops. And sadly, I am sure there are many more as well.
Yeah.
I do not believe that there was foul play in Sandra's death. However, I think that there were many systemic issues that led to this tragic outcome. First, there's the problem that correction officers did not know that Sandra missed several doses of her epilepsy medication. And again, this could have led to severe side effects.
Yeah.
Also, there was a plastic bag in the garbage can of her cell. And this is the one that she allegedly used to cut off her own airflow. I mean, if she told staff that she had attempted suicide in the past, number one, should they have checked on her more frequently? But at the very least, should they have had a plastic bag in the cell with her?
No.
Meghan, as we know from our work, when someone is booked into a jail or prison, of course, everything that you could use to self-harm is taken away.
Yeah.
Shoelaces, belts,
Yep.
right? What am
Yep.
I forgetting here? I mean,
That's why I was like, plastic bags. It doesn't seem like they would allow that, but I'm not sure. But that seems like a big oversight to me.
so it seems to me that this was a combination of aggressive policing in that the officer was originally just giving a ticket to Sandra, and then the situation escalated over a cigarette. I also think there's racial profiling involved. It's possible that her lack of compliance was seen as violent due to her race. There's also...
Is
Go ahead.
it possible? I'm just going to play devil's advocate here because I do believe all these things are true. But is it possible that her lack of compliance, even if she wasn't Black, would have been a problem and would have escalated the situation? Because it sounds like this officer, even if he was racially biased, had a real strong record of like, I'm law and order. I go after people for minor infractions, like discretion, maybe out the window.
Yeah.
So I wonder if... I understand the role race plays because obviously this is what we deal with. But I wonder if like he was just a very aggressive officer in general. And regardless of her race, like just lack of compliance for him was one of those, you know?
Yes. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's also important to recognize that lack of compliance can be seen as a dangerous situation for officers.
Yeah.
So we also have to, we weren't there. So I think it's important that, based on his history, as you said, it seems like there's something with a power dynamic going on with
aggressive.
him. He's seen very aggressive, but there are many situations where people are not compliant with officers and that could lead to harm for the officers. So, it's a very difficult job and they have to kind of in the moment decide what the right thing to do. And then, of course, we mentioned the failures in jail procedures, such as not adhering to standards of prisoner observation.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier about the perjury charge, right?
Yes. Okay.
So people were upset that there was a lack of accountability here. Now, the officer was indicted for perjury for lying in his report about the arrest. So basically, in a sworn affidavit, he stated that Sandra had been, quote, combative and uncooperative after he stopped her, and then he removed her from the car to conduct a safer traffic investigation. However, the video shows otherwise. A lot of this stuff is subjective.
What do you mean? Like the video shows that she wasn't combative or it wasn't for safety or he was just annoyed. He was just being aggressive. Like
I think, yes, I think all of the above. Let me tell you, these charges were dropped and I don't disagree with that because it does seem like it seems a little subjective, based on the video to really know his reasoning for doing things and whether or not he felt that she was being combative because some of this is subjective. We can't deny that.
No.
The charges were dropped, though, in exchange for his resignation.
I don't like that part, just so you know, because that makes me think that it was something very serious and they're just letting him go quietly. But
yep, that's why people are upset about the lack of accountability.
Well, I don't blame them for that because I have seen this happen before where there is serious wrongdoing and instead of really going forth and prosecuting it, it's like, if you quietly resign, we'll let you go. And I don't like that either.
I agree. But I also, at the same time, I think two things could be true at once.
Yes.
While I agree with you, I also do not believe that this was the officer's fault. Now, while he did arrest Sandra on shaky grounds, I do not think that we can make the connection between his arrest and, this tragic ending. To me, it's more about a chain of events rooted in the unequal treatment and poor handling of mental health and really just a justice system that fails people at every turn.
I think that's well said. And I also agree with you, too, that I believe that based on the facts that she did die by suicide, but that, that she would not have likely had it not been for this awful chain of events and failures and systemic failures. Yeah. And I agree. This is like important to see at every step where the failures were.
And no one was ever held directly responsible for Sandra's death, but maybe that's because there really isn't anyone who could be directly blamed.
Right.
Regardless, Sandra's case became a catalyst for change and prompted the conversation on a national scale. Hashtags like Say Her Name gained momentum. I'm sure you recall protesters carried signs with her face at marches for justice.
Yeah.
There were artists, musicians, and filmmakers who used her story to highlight issues of racial injustice, gendered violence, and mental health in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch it, but the documentary Say Her Name, The Life and Death of Sandra Bland, HBO 2018, it gave a more personal and investigative look at her story, and it was based on cell phone footage, interviews, and jail recordings. So I would highly suggest that if you're interested.
You know, I don't recall that documentary either, which is weird. Like the hashtag I knew very well, but not the documentary, so I will.
Okay. There has been some movement in the right direction as far as what's going on in our country and race relations. There have been some reform efforts. There's more public awareness and activism. There's certainly more transparency, which leads to more accountability.
Yeah.
And I think it bears repeating. And I'm pretty sure I say almost the exact thing in our Reconsidered because I feel really strongly about this. While there has been progress in raising awareness and implementing certain reforms, the criminal justice system in our country still faces significant racial inequalities. And really, the fact of the matter is that significant work remains to be done to fully address racial bias within our system.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're interested in learning more, of course, check out our upcoming Reconsidered episode. I would also highly recommend Michelle Alexander's book that I mentioned earlier. It's called The New Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one of the documentaries I know you and I both always show our students when talking about this area is the documentary 13th on Netflix.
Yes.
There are also several organizations that offer valuable resources on the intersection of race and crime. So there's the NACDL, the ACLU, the NAACP. Mm-hmm. Those are just a few that come to mind.
Yeah.
These are the types of organizations that provide information on racial disparities in the criminal justice system. And you could find resources on policing, pretrial practices, public defense. And then I can't not mention Brian Stevenson's organization, the Equal Justice Initiative.
Of course.
And the Prison Policy Initiative is another one.
How about the Marshall Project, too?
The Marshall Project also. Yeah. That's a great one, too. Mm. And these kind of organizations offer research and advocacy on issues like wrongful conviction, incarceration rates, and just racial disparities in general, some focusing on racial disparities specifically in the death penalty.
Yeah.
Hopefully we provided enough resources for you to do some future research to really look into the issue of racism in our criminal legal system or criminal justice system, depending on what you prefer. All right. So that was a lot of information today.
But it was great. That was a great Thank you. That was a great episode, Amy.
Thank you. Before we go, though, we do have a question from a listener. We actually get several through our Instagram. Now, I know you see those often. Yeah. This is a recent one that stood out to me. Mm-hmm. The question is there such thing as a criminal mind, or is crime more about circumstance? Ooh. So another way to ask this is nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
How often do you talk about this in your class?
All the time.
All the time. This is like the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any way to really know? Of course not. Are there some people that are born with some sort of biological marker, whether it be neurological or psychological, that increases their propensity for violence and aggression? Sure. Is it possible that one's environment leads them to become violent and aggressive? Sure. Just like we see people who are brought up in some of the worst of circumstances who go on to not offend, we see people that are brought up in the very best of circumstances who do offend. Hence, we can't really say if it's nature or nurture. So sorry, there's no answer to your question. Meghan, do you have something?
It's not a straightforward answer. In extreme cases, so like in cases where we're looking at the most antisocial people, which is not norm, like most offenders are not antisocial to the extreme. But I will say in those cases, it's usually both. There is usually some type of a biological marker or maybe something that happens like a head injury, something of that nature, paired with some type of very traumatic event or series of events. So that's in the extreme cases. And the other ones can be either one. And this is going to be the debate forever in our field, I think.
Yes, it is. Thank you for that question. It's one we get often, and it's one that we don't have an answer to. So I apologize.
It's not an either or, you know?
It's not. As always, if you have a question, feel free to message us at womenandcrimepodcast.com/contact. And a reminder, if you're a patron at the Lyford tier, then your question is guaranteed to be read on air. Thank you all so much for listening today, and we'll catch you next time on Women and Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include the Houston Chronicle, New York Times, CNN, New York Daily News, the Washington Post, NBC, ABC News, the Wall Street Journal, ABC13.com, BBC, the Huffington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the initial autopsy report from July 14, 2015, the Waller County Sheriff's Office Committee recommended police and jail practices, and the Chicago Tribune.